Halloween night. I always thought that nights like these were just a big grown-up joke, where fear was carefully packaged into sweet candies and plastic masks. My neighbors in the Northwood District had done a great job decorating, transforming their quaint old American houses into lavish mortuaries and haunted forests. I was walking my niece Lily along the stone-paved sidewalk. She was 7, wearing an enormous, puffy Elsa princess costume, her small face bright under the glow of the pumpkin lanterns. The air was bitingly cold, but Lily's excitement kept me warm. In the distance, a crackling pop song played from one of the houses, and the smell of burning maple leaves mingled with chocolate. Everything was normal, the kind of normal that makes people forget anything bad could ever happen. We had passed about 20 houses, and Lily's candy bag was heavy. I was about to tell her it was time to go home when we came to a street I rarely visited, where the houses looked older and sparser. At the end of the row, there was a faded, white-painted house. It wasn't completely dark, but only a faint yellow light shone from the front porch. The juniper trees in front of the house were overgrown, casting vague, looming shadows. It was not a very appealing stop, but Lily quickly ran up the steps. "Uncle John, this house is decorated nicely," she whispered. I followed her gaze. On the porch, next to an old rocking chair, sat a dummy. It was posed sitting, head slumped, wearing a worn leather jacket and ripped jeans. Fake blood was smeared on its forehead and trailed down its throat, dripping onto the wooden floor. A large pumpkin, its face carved into a twisted smile, was placed on the dummy's lap. In the flickering light, it looked truly convincing. Too convincing. I stepped onto the porch, clutching Lily's hand. The silence of this house was a stark contrast to the loud laughter and the opening and closing doors of the other houses. "Maybe they're not home, Lily," I said, "but they have decorations," she countered, pointing to a handwritten sign placed next to the dummy. "Take a candy if you dare." I bent down. Next to the sign was a large metal bowl filled with candy. I pulled Lily closer to me, but my eyes remained fixed on the dummy. Even though I was a tired nurse who could rationalize everything, my gut instinct was screaming. I had seen many wounds in my life. Fake blood is usually bright red and glossy. The blood on this man was dark brown, dry and flaking, soaking into the fabric of the jacket. I took a step back and looked more closely at the man's old leather shoes. They were positioned at an odd angle. Then I saw the fingers, bare fingers, dirty fingernails, and a bruise on the back of the hand that looked very fresh. This was not a dummy. A chill ran down my spine. It was colder than the Halloween night air. The outside world, which only seconds ago had been a festival of lanterns and sweets, suddenly became alien. I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding too fast. I realized I was holding my breath. "John, can I take a candy?" Lily asked, starting to reach for the bowl. My survival instinct automatically kicked in. I didn't scream. The horror prevented me from making any sound. I knew that if this was a real dead body, the person who had done it was probably still nearby, perhaps watching us from inside the house or from the thick bushes. Every surrounding sound felt heightened. I gently pulled Lily back. "We shouldn't take candy here, Lily. It looks like they have an electrical problem. Let's go home." Lily started to argue, but she noticed the tension on my face. My eyes tried to scan every detail of the house. The front door was closed, but the large front window was slightly ajar, just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness inside. Was it the wind, or had someone opened it? I began to back away, one slow step at a time, trying to maintain an even breathing rhythm. I had to get Lily out of this area silently. If a killer was lurking in that house, I didn't want him to know that we had discovered him. As we stepped off the porch, a light bulb inside the house flickered on. I grabbed Lily's hand and started to walk faster. Not running. Absolutely no running. Running would draw attention. I just moved quickly, deliberately, like someone trying to outpace the rain. "Hurry up, Lily. We're going to the house with the giant skeleton decorations now, okay?" I said, my voice hoarse. When we were about 20 meters from the house, I dared to look back. The slightly ajar window was now closed. It felt as if someone had just corrected a minor mistake. I led Lily across the lawn instead of the sidewalk, my feet deliberately stepping onto the thickest patches of grass to minimize sound. We needed to get out of this neighborhood and reach a place with more people, more light. Every step was a struggle. I recalled stories I had heard about the terror of being followed. Had the killer seen us? Did he know we had seen him? 2 more blocks away, I couldn't keep my composure any longer. I saw a couple standing and chatting in front of their house. I let go of Lily's hand and ran toward them. "Call 911 immediately," I whispered, my voice trembling. I was shaking as if I had just escaped a chase. The woman looked at me, confused. "What's wrong?" "The white-painted house on Ashwood Street, number 428. There's a dead body on the porch. It looks like a Halloween dummy, but it's a real person." I tried to explain, my words broken by fear. The man immediately pulled out his phone. I stood there, leaning against the wooden fence, trying to breathe. My lungs were burning. The police arrived within minutes, their sirens wailing, shattering the tranquility of the Halloween night. I handed Lily over to the couple to look after and returned to house number 428 with the officers. The front of the house was now brightly lit under the police floodlights. When an officer stepped onto the porch and lifted the pumpkin, the truth was starkly revealed in the blinding light. It was a man, dead. Another officer asked me for details. I recounted the light coming on and the window closing. "He might still be in the house," I said. The police cordoned off the area and began to search the house. I stood outside, watching the patrol cars, the curious neighbors beginning to gather, the flashing lights reflecting on the horror masks and princess costumes. A moment later, an officer emerged from the house. His face was grave. We found signs of forced entry at the back door and a shovel abandoned in the garden. "Is he in there?" I asked. "No, but we found evidence that he just left," the officer replied. "He vanished into the Halloween crowd." That was the most terrifying thing to me. The killer had been there in the shadows, waiting for us to leave, or perhaps preparing something else. He wasn't a monster from a fairy tale. He was an ordinary person, hidden in a costume, or simply walking among the trick-or-treaters, completely unnoticed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I took Lily back to my place and tried to assure her that everything was just a bad Halloween prank. But I knew the truth. Fear had taken root in me. I started checking the front door locks, the window locks, multiple times. I began to avoid walking on empty streets. I no longer trusted the peace of the night. Every sound, whether it was the wind or falling leaves, became significant, as if it were being amplified. I started to think about the small details. Why did he leave the pumpkin and the candy bowl there? Did he want others to come closer so he could have more victims? Or was he simply trying to cover up his crime with the festive setting? Months later, the police announced they had caught a suspect thanks to a faint fingerprint on the shovel. He was a man living in the next town over, with no criminal record, an ordinary plumber. The case seemed closed, but for me, it remains open. Every time I see children in costumes running on the sidewalks on subsequent Halloween nights, I don't see joy. I only felt the lingering obsession that had been etched into my mind that Halloween. That night was supposed to be a normal event, the kind of normal that makes you forget anything bad can happen. I stood in the middle of Central Avenue, my cheap vampire costume already starting to itch beneath the sharp, late October chill. Pumpkin lanterns hung from the lampposts, casting eerie orange shadows, and the music from a mediocre band vibrated through the air. This was Halloween in Silver Lake, our city, where everyone tried to hide themselves only to reveal themselves publicly. Thousands of people were packed together, the smell of caramel apples, cheap beer, and synthetic fog mingling. I held a soft drink, leaning against the brick wall of a closed antique shop. I didn't need to be there. I was the type who preferred watching horror movies alone, but my roommate had convinced me to go out. This noise, this ceaseless revelry, made me feel too vulnerable, too predictable. Everything started to change around 9 p.m. It wasn't a loud noise. It was more like a metal object dropping onto a hardwood floor. I thought it was a misfired firework, some ghoulish joke. But then the band stopped abruptly. A heavy silence descended, more potent than any noise could create. Then the sound came again, more definitive. It came from above, not from the ground. Distant, but not too distant. And then came the scream. It was the first scream, raw and brief, like a snapped guitar string. Following that, a series of dry bursts echoing off the buildings. There was no mistaking it. It was gunfire. For a second, my brain froze. I looked at the faces around me, faces painted as monsters but now frozen in pure fear. The crowd erupted into chaos. Thousands of people, now not costumed figures or revelers, but rigid, panicking objects, trying to move faster than the one beside them. I was swept into it. My soft drink fell, shattering on the pavement. I felt pushed, trampled. I clutched my jacket. Survival instinct took over. I didn't think about direction. I just knew I needed to get out of here, out of this main street, where I was too exposed and predictable. I needed to protect myself. The gunfire erupted again, longer and closer. The explosions now had weight. They weren't just sounds anymore. They were physical jolts to the chest. People started to fall. A girl in an angel costume directly in front of me stumbled. I tried to grab her, but the momentum of the crowd was too strong. I was carried away. I saw a narrow alleyway between the antique store and a pizza parlor. That steel door, usually padlocked, was slightly ajar tonight. Maybe it was an entrance for delivery workers. I lunged into it. The space inside the alley immediately became cold and foul. The smell of garbage bins, old grease, and a sharp metallic odor. The smell of blood. I squeezed past giant metal dumpsters. Outside, the screaming was muffled. The gunfire sounded a little farther away, absorbed by the brick walls, but it was continuous, cyclical, like a broken clock. I wanted to call 911, but the phone in my hand was shaking too violently. I crouched low, my back pressed against the brick wall. This alley led out to another street, but I didn't dare emerge. I knew that if I stepped out, I would become visible. In the dark, I saw a shadow move across the alley. It was an older woman, her ordinary clothes soiled with mud. She was trying to open a rusty chain-link gate. I didn't speak. I didn't make a sound. I just breathed, the sound impossibly loud in my ears. I told myself I had to be still, to make my presence invisible. I stood there feeling my chest about to explode, but I couldn't move. The gunfire suddenly stopped. Complete silence. That silence was more terrifying than any noise. It lasted for a few seconds, then a single resounding shot, like a final period. After that, there was only the sound of a city breaking. Sirens began wailing in the distance. I waited until the sound of police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks engulfed the street. Blue and red lights flashed, illuminating the dumpsters. I slowly lifted myself, my bones stiff. When I crawled out of the alley, the scene that hit me was like a ripped painting. The festival was over. Decorations were trampled, discarded masks, smashed pumpkin lanterns, and the people lying there. Police were everywhere. I saw an officer speaking on the phone, his voice calm and professional, contrasting with the horrific chaos. I tried to walk, but my legs wouldn't stop shaking. I stepped away from the alley toward the crowd gathering at a safer street corner. An officer saw me. He walked over, his face strained. "Are you injured?" he asked. I shook my head, my throat constricted. I couldn't speak. Everything had turned into a jumbled mess of emotions. I just wanted to know what had happened. "We have the subject contained," he said. "It's over." Police investigated, interviewed witnesses. They said a single attacker had climbed onto the roof of an abandoned office building across from the festival area. They found the semi-automatic rifle. They found the shell casings. He had no motive. A senior officer told us after collecting statements. He just wanted to know that he could see everyone, and he waited for the right time, the right scenario. He knew that the chaos, the predictability of the crowd made them perfect targets. I returned to my apartment at 4 a.m. The dim streetlights shone through the window. My apartment, which I once thought of as my safe little world, was now just four walls. I changed clothes, trying to wash off the smell of dust and dried blood, not mine, but still on me. I sat on the sofa, staring at the blank wall. My mind was blank. The next day, I read the news. Dozens dead, dozens injured. The attacker's name was not one I knew. He was an ordinary person, an invisible person, someone I might have passed by that day. It was even worse when I realized that danger doesn't always look like danger. Every time I hear an ambulance siren, something I used to consider city background noise, it now makes my heart pound. A part of me is stuck in that horrific Halloween night. I survived, but the cost was a permanent inability to trust the safety of the world around me. On Halloween night, the sky over suburban New Jersey was dark and heavy, but not with an approaching storm. It was heavy because the only light was the faint glow from the devil-faced jack-o'-lanterns, along with the coldness of October. I, along with Marcus, Chloe, and Liam, had decided to break the tradition of attending the university party. Instead, we chose to wander through the town's old streets, dressed up as familiar characters, enjoying the quiet yet exhilarating feeling, while everyone else was gathering. Since moving here, we had created a fixed Saturday night routine, circling Elmwood Park, crossing the 3rd Street residential area, and finishing with a warm coffee at the street corner. Around 11 p.m., we were walking through the area of Victorian-era houses, where the shadows of old oak trees cast ghostly shapes on the sidewalk. Everything was normal, the kind of normal that makes you forget anything bad could ever happen. Marcus was telling a terrible joke. I tried to fake a laugh, but a strange feeling of unease began to creep in. It was a car, an old matte black sedan parked about 2 blocks away from us. It wasn't moving. It was just there, headlights off, but I felt like someone was watching. When we turned onto Willow Street, the quietest street in the neighborhood, I looked back. The black car was gone. I told myself maybe someone was waiting for a friend. I was a tired person, and tired people often look for ways to explain everything. But about 5 minutes later, the feeling returned. I didn't hear a car, but I felt something I can't explain. "Guys," I said softly, my voice dry. "Walk a little faster." "What is it, Alex?" Chloe asked. I didn't answer. We walked faster, our footsteps echoing too clearly on the cold pavement. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not our echoes, but different footsteps, rhythmic and slow, catching up to us from behind. I turned my head. Under the dim street lamp, about 30 meters behind us, was a shadow. He was tall, wearing a dark, oversized coat. He wore a hood that obscured his face. He wasn't running. He was only walking, but the speed was enough to maintain the distance, as if he was playing a game. "Run!" I screamed. The 4 of us bolted forward, our breaths ragged. I couldn't think of anything. My brain was completely empty. We crashed through a small alley between 2 houses, hoping to cut across the neighborhood to the main street. This area was full of small alleys and shortcuts. We had used them hundreds of times. We knew these paths like the back of our hands. But tonight, that knowledge was no longer a comfort. We dashed across a dark parking lot. I felt my chest was about to explode. Chloe stumbled, but Marcus managed to pull her up. "We have to split up," Liam gasped. "No," I protested. "We stick together." We ran out of the parking lot and down another street where most of the houses had their lights off. He was still there at the fixed distance. Sometimes I thought he slowed down just to make sure we knew he was still watching. Then we saw it. An old, abandoned house, surrounded by a low iron fence. The side door seemed loose. Without a word, we knew this was our only chance to break his line of sight. We squeezed through the fence. Liam was the last one, and as soon as he got through, we heard the footsteps outside stop. He was standing right outside the fence. Inside the house, the air was cold and damp. We huddled in a narrow hallway. I pulled out my phone, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped it on the stairs. "Call 911, Marcus whispered. "He's right outside the door," I replied. "We can't make any noise." Silence descended. Even our breathing was too loud. I leaned back against the wall, trying to flatten myself against the darkness. This feeling was worse than any noise could create. Suddenly we heard a faint sound from the back, in the kitchen. A weak sound, as if a glass object hit a countertop. "Someone else?" Chloe was terrified. "No." Impossible. I pointed my phone's light toward the kitchen. I saw a door leading to the basement, always tightly latched in every old house. Now it was slightly ajar. A feeling of sheer horror surged up. He could have circled around, sneaked into the basement, and waited for us to hide. He knew everything. I signaled the group. Upstairs. We moved slowly, putting all our weight on our heels. One step at a time. Every minute dragged on. Reaching the 2nd floor, everything was darker. We found an old bedroom with the shutters closed tight. "We're trapped," Liam said, pointing to the clumsily nailed shut window. I looked around. The room was empty, except for a large, old wardrobe. "Get in there," I said. "Don't say anything." We crammed into the tight space, the wardrobe door closing. I gripped Chloe's hand, my palms drenched with sweat. I thought about his face, the face I had never clearly seen. We heard the footsteps. This time they were no longer slow. They were heavy, decisive, sweeping through the house. He was upstairs. The footsteps stopped right in front of the bedroom door. No knock, no words. Just a deadly silence. Then I heard the doorknob turn. The door opened. I clenched my phone. I could dial 911 at any time, but I knew making noise now would be suicide. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps resumed. A heavy step, then the footsteps glided across the room, heading toward the wardrobe. Then silence. He was standing right outside. I tried to control my breathing. Marcus, who was behind me, was shaking uncontrollably. We heard the rustle of fabric, as if he was bending down. Then a tiny, very slight sound came from beneath the wardrobe door, like something metallic was sliding through the gap. I felt a cold draft rush through the crack in the cabinet. The footsteps backed away. 1, 2, 3 steps. Then, as quick as lightning, I heard him running down the stairs. "Go!" I whispered. We scrambled out of the wardrobe. We ran downstairs, across the kitchen, and bolted out the side door we had entered. We ran frantically toward the main street. Luckily, the bright lights and the sound of distant car horns changed the situation. He didn't chase us anymore. His habit was to stalk in the shadows, where he could control everything. He didn't want to be seen in a crowd. We met the police at the corner. My hand was still shaking as I stammered out everything. They found the house. On the wooden floor beneath the wardrobe door, the police found a small sticky note. It was written in block letters, "See you again. Your scared expression is cute." They didn't catch him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I haven't slept properly any night since then. I learned how to listen. Every small sound from the vent, every creak under the floor came alive. That feeling still haunts me, the feeling of being watched. I never walk that way again. Like a scar you can point to, the memory of that Halloween night never fades. Halloween night is always a thin veneer over chaos, and for me that year, the veneer shattered. I was in Oak Haven, a quiet suburb a half-hour's drive from the city, house-sitting for my aunt and uncle during the holiday. The costume festivities had long ended. A thick fog was starting to roll in, making the leftover jack-o'-lanterns look like glowing red eyes. I was sitting in the living room, trying to relax after my friends had left. I had hosted a small group for a horror movie night, but the atmosphere quickly grew heavier when I noticed something strange. It felt like someone had been watching me. This feeling wasn't new. A few weeks prior, I had received an anonymous letter containing only a single, cryptic sentence. Though the note was so short and simple, it caused a deep sense of unease. I tried to dismiss it, thinking it was just a prank by neighborhood kids, or maybe just a harmless mistake. However, this feeling of being watched had persisted. I got up and walked toward the kitchen window. The light from the dim street lamp struggled to pierce the fog. I had absolutely no intention of acting recklessly, but curiosity and fear were battling fiercely in my head. I moved closer and pulled the window open slightly, just a small crack. I wanted to see if anyone was out there. And then I saw a dark figure. Initially, I thought it was just a large bush, but the shape was still and taller than anything in the yard. I felt my chest pounding. I closed the window, making no sound. I knew for sure this wasn't a late-arriving party guest. I was being watched. I turned back into the house, deciding to go lock all the doors, even though they had been locked before. As I walked past the back door, the storm door suddenly rattled. There was a knock. It was a quick, rhythmic, and repeating series of knocks. My heart seemed to stop. The voice outside drifted in, muffled by the glass and door, so it sounded very small. It was high-pitched and sounded cheerful, as if a friend was trying to join the fun. It was definitely a young person's voice, perhaps a teenager, and didn't sound at all fake. The horror grew inside me. I did not answer. The knocking stopped. Then a clear voice, muffled by the door, rang out decisively. "Open the door for me." I backed away. I ran upstairs, trying to stay calm. I called the police, but the line was busy, likely due to minor incidents on Halloween night. I tried to contact my uncle, but the phone rang unanswered. I crept back downstairs and circled toward the kitchen window again. Despite my immense fear, I couldn't take my eyes off where he had been standing. I looked through the narrow slit of glass next to the door and saw his shadow. He was standing under the dim light, and as he moved closer, his face became clear. He wasn't wearing an elaborate costume mask, but simply a red knit hoodie and a plain, emotionless white mask. He started gesturing towards the side of the house where the window was. He wanted me to come closer to the window to talk. I had no intention of opening the door for him. I walked to the kitchen window and cracked it open just a bit. He stepped closer. I asked him what he wanted. He gave a slight laugh. "Oh, so you got my message," he said. He continued that he had been observing me from afar and that we could have been good friends. "Get lost, you creepy stalker," I said, my voice trembling. The smile vanished from his face. He tilted his head as if he didn't understand what I had just said. Immediately, his expression morphed into something I can only describe as maniacal hatred. He shifted from passive and slightly friendly to aggressive and furious. He started screaming, cursing at me, saying he hated my friends and thought we should die. He thrust his hand toward the window, trying to forcibly bend the lock and shove it open, but I had securely locked and braced it. He started growling at the window and pounding on it like a wild animal. I was certain he was seconds away from smashing the glass. In a panic, I backed away, running toward the living room. I needed to barricade the doors. While searching for something heavy to block the main door, I suddenly noticed something unusual. The side gate leading to the backyard was wide open. We normally used a small rope to tie the gate shut. The fact that it was open meant someone had deliberately untied it. I should have called the police or barricaded myself in a safe room, but in my state of extreme panic, I decided to investigate. I put the flashlight down on the floor and tried to go straight toward the backyard. Just as I turned the corner of the house, before I could clearly see anything, I felt a rope tightening around my throat. I thrashed wildly, but in vain. Someone was choking me from behind, and I was completely helpless. I felt the rough fibers of the rope digging deep into my throat as he squeezed with all his might. I thought I was going to die. With all my remaining strength, I kicked violently backward. He lost his balance, and both of us tumbled to the ground. The rope loosened and I could breathe again. But he was still on top of me. In a rage, he clawed at my face and I felt blood streaming down my cheek. I used every ounce of my strength to push him off. He staggered to his feet before running out of my sight. It all happened too fast. I lay there, gasping for breath, the burning pain in my neck and face. I didn't call the police right away. I just wanted to leave that house. I ran to my car, driving away without looking back. I went to a nearby gas station and called. The police arrived. They took a report of the assault and tried to search the area for the attacker, but to no avail. I was taken to the hospital. The cuts on my face were not too serious, but I needed several shots to guard against any diseases the guy might be carrying. The next morning, I was informed that local police could not find his identity. They suspected he was a mentally ill homeless person or a psychologically disturbed young man who had developed a strange fondness for me and had been stalking me for a long time. The case became complicated, and despite police involvement, everything seemed to quickly get hushed up, and no one could track the guy down. I moved out of that house shortly after my aunt and uncle returned. Although I survived, the feelings of being watched and vulnerability were deeply etched.